everyone, happy Sabbath and welcome back to another episode of Your Purpose Project. Today we're going to be talking about submission, and especially submission in a relationship. In today's world, anything that is strong, dynamic, and very aggressive that comes from a man is toxic masculinity. I want to first reaffirm that as a man, it's okay for you to be dominant. It's okay for you to be strong. It's okay for you to be assertive. It's okay for you to walk with your chin up, your chest out, and for you to lay a strong foundation and to be powerful, as long as it's done in the concept of love and respect and it is not abusive. For women, it's okay for you to be feminine. It's okay for you to be submissive, because those things are holy and sacred for you to do. And what the world's going to try to say is that as men and women, we have to be adversarial, but in an environment, we're supposed to be complementary. That there cannot be too masculine within the home because they will butt heads. There cannot be too feminine in the home. That the male and feminine dynamic was made to be complementary, that one covers the other. Notice in Genesis chapter 1, he creates male and female in his own image. He makes one stronger and one weaker, and they're supposed to work together. That think about it like this, man. You lay the foundation, you lay the structure of the home, and the woman comes in and she's like the interior designer that works into the nitty gritty. You as a man are a micro nurturer, she is a micro nurturer. You're the macro nurturer and she is the micro nurturer. And the macro looks at the large picture. It cares that there's a bowl that's in front of them, in front of you. The woman cares what's in the bowl. And when we're able to see how these two, one covers the other, we're able to work in an environment that's what the Father wants us to be. However, let's go to the Word in order to understand how this dynamic is supposed to happen and where submission is supposed to take place and how submission is supposed to take place. So our text is going to start in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 to 33. And it says, "Wives, submit to your husbands, as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church. And he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything." Not some things, in everything. But let's break down this dynamic. That first, wives are submitting to Christ first. They're submitting to the Lord. And then it says that husbands are the head of their wives, right? And that Christ is the head of the church. But notice, this is not about degradation in submission. The head is not about someone is less than it is about protection. Because in verse 23, it says that Jesus, Christ, is the head of the church and he is the Savior of the body. Notice, if something is saving something else, he's protecting it. He's redeeming it. Is that he's putting himself on the lifeline for us. And this interplay is how we as men must interact with the woman. That for us, we have to be the protectors. We must be the saviors. We must lay a foundation so that she can submit. That it's impossible for a woman to submit in an environment where it's not loving. It's impossible for her to submit in an environment that's not protecting her. It's impossible for her to submit in an environment that's not providing for her. And so when we're seeing this interplay, that is important as men, that we're creating a protective environment. That it says the head of every man is Christ, the head of every woman is man, is about protection. That it's about survival, right? So men, for a woman to submit to you, she has to make sure that the environment feels protected. That it's about survival. She's coming to you, if she's going to let down her hair, if she's going to let herself be herself, she has to make sure that the environment is going to protect it. And at times she's going to test the environment to make sure that it is conducive. But the question is, how does a man create this? The focus so much is on a man's financial environment that he creates. And that is important. We're going to look at a case study where that is the case. However, that is only one aspect. There's two other things that are super important for a man in order to create an environment for a woman to submit. And we see that in verse 25. It says, "Husband, love your wives." Thing number one is that you first as a man need to love. Just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Right? So love is the first aspect. And sacrifice is the second one. Love and sacrifice have to be the first things that men do in order for a woman to submit in that environment. But we move a little bit forward in verse 26. That he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word. This is the next thing, that a man not only needs to be loving and sacrificial, but lastly, he also needs to be the priest of her home. Notice what it says, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of the water by the word. That at the end of the day, in any relationship, the man has to be the protector, the provider, and the priest. The 3 P's, the protector, the provider, and the priest. And outside at this environment that's done well, that's held strong, the woman won't submit. And why is this important that we have these things? Because notice, a lot of women in today have come from situations where they are scared that the relationship has hurt them. And so it's hard for them to come to a new environment and expect to submission. So society now has bred a whole bunch of strong women who believe that they don't need a man because the situations they have come from have shown them that a man is not able to protect, provide, and be the priest of the home. And so for any woman to submit in that environment, you have to lay that foundation strong, but do it so well just as Christ. But notice in verse 28 it says, so husbands ought to love their wives like their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. So it has to be to the point that you love the woman so much that you're able to take care of yourself. But notice, let's jump down to verse 33, and it says, nonetheless, let each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. So out of the context, if love, then respects. It's a conditional statement. And it's like, okay, why does a man have to go first? But notice it says that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. That before we as the church ever loved him, ever submitted to him, he put the first step forward and he sacrificed everything for us, right? The Father gave his Son for us because he loves us. And so when we see his love for us, we see that he died for us. We're just only responding to the love that he's given us. That we keep the 10 commandments, the commandments of love. The first 4 is how we love him, and the rest 6 is how we love our neighbor, is because we're only responding to what he's done for us. And notice what Jesus was saying. The greatest command, love the Lord with all your heart, your mind, and your soul, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. That is important that men first love themselves, first love Christ, and then love themselves. And outside of this, a man can never love the woman. That when we look at the Bible, the word perfect, the perfect means complete. It does not mean without fault. And so men, you must be complete before there is a woman. You must love such in a place that you are strong enough to love her, to lay a foundation. And so when she tests your love, it's not based on what you felt when you first saw her, but based on the decision that you'll make first for a man who's married on the altar. And if you're dating, then it's the decision to love outside of that feeling, outside of what your moment might desire. But this is the context of how a woman is to submit to a man, is that the man has to lay a foundation for love. And then when that love is tested, he's able to stand true to it. But man, how do we love? And the Bible gives us a strong foundation about how to love, how to set that foundation a little bit further. So in understanding how love looks, we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 4. And it says that love suffers long, love is patient, and is kind. Love does not envy. So it's secure in itself. So young men, you're not looking at other young men to determine your masculinity. You're not looking at how big someone else's penis is in regards to something. You're secure. You do not envy something else. You do not desire who has a fancier car, who has bigger muscles. You are comfortable in and of yourself. That doesn't mean you're average, but you're comfortable in yourself. Love does not envy, because an insecure man can never create an environment to be submitted to. Why? Because he is unstable in and of himself. So a man has to not envy, he must be secure in himself. Love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up. This does not, now we're going to the egotistical man who believes he's something, and when we're looking at this puffed up, notice it's just ear. There's no foundation behind it. That a true man is able to let his actions speak louder than his words. Verse 5, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own way, and is not provoked. Key word right here, does not seek its own way. So young man, in a relationship, if sex is your game, you cannot love, and then thus you cannot create an environment where she can submit to. Because notice what happens, a lot of women come into relationships looking for a place to survive, a place to be secure, but because a man is caught up on his own thinking, he will strip the woman of her essence, of the security that she needs, and she will go back into the world not able to find it. And so then she has to make herself tough and hard. And then when we see a lot of, I don't need a man, brothers ain't anything, it's because she's been hurt in such a place and there's not an environment that is able to help her to feel secure. But a man who's willing to lay a strong foundation of love is able to let this woman, even though seems strong, come into a place where she's realizing she doesn't have to always be on guard. Why? Because the person who's creating that environment is looking at the betterment of her and not himself. Looking at creating an environment that will move her forward, move him forward, and not strip something. Notice what we saw in Ephesians chapter 5, is that the man washes her with the word, that he presents her as holy unto himself. But for that to happen, a man must be looking at creating the environment that will be benefiting to her and not necessarily always to himself. And then it says, thinks no evil. Verse 6, does not rejoice in iniquity, does not rejoice in sexual immorality, does not rejoice in hurting her feelings, but rejoices in truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. Verse 8. But we're going to skip down to verse 11 because this, I think, is really, really powerful. Because it says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And we separate love from this text, but it's written in that context because a true man becomes a man when he knows how to love. That your penis makes you a male. When you love, it makes you a man. And this is important because when you're able to lay this foundation, you're no longer thinking about yourself. Being respectful is a decision, it's not an emotion. Endurance is not an emotion, it's an action. And when, as men, we can create environments that we are loving, women are able to submit to us. But notice, we only become a man when we're able to love. That if you're still thinking about, I'm going to be with her because I know if I hit that, I make myself feel like a man, you're a boy. And when you think, oh, I'm just going to feel, when I want to validate myself because I've gotten her number, because of all these different things, you're still a boy. But when you're saying, I want to put someone in an environment to make sure that I can wash them with the word, that I can protect, provide, and be a priest in the context of love, then I become a man. But now let's move forward to talk about the woman and how she has to deciding that she wants to, and a man who wants to be in that space wants to submit, and how she's supposed to do that, and the power, keyword power, that comes with submission. So we're going to be in 1 Peter chapter 3, and it says in verse 1, wives, likewise, be submissive to your husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives. I'm going to run that back. That even if some do not obey the word, they, without a word, may be won over by the conduct of their wives. Notice, love begets love. That when a woman submits to a man in respect does not mean that you allow yourself to be abused, does not allow yourself to be taken advantage of. But submission is not about your value, then it is about the interplay of how respect is given. Right? Submissiveness is based on respect, right? It's not based on you're acting as if you're lower than something, but it's acquiescence to the leadership of the man. And we're going to look at that word a little bit later in Hebrew, what submissiveness actually means. But notice it's so powerful that when a woman submits by her conduct, that she can win a man back who does not believe in Christ or in the word back because of her conduct. That is power. That without words you're doing that. That a woman who's in her word, that is strong enough to be respectful to a man, right? It does not mean she's allowing herself to be disrespected, right? And she's willing to walk away in that respect. Can do such a place because she knows her value, right? But this is even deep because we see this in verses chapter 2 through 6. When the man who doesn't believe observes your chaste conduct, accompanied by fear. Fear does not mean scared, it means respect. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging of the hair, wearing of gold, putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart, which is incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. Precious to who? To the man or to God. It's precious to God that when it's not about how good you look, even not saying that looking good is a problem, but when your character is in a place, notice your chaste conduct is accompanied with respect, then it can change the environment or the man that you're with. It's not about how loud you are. It's not about how many degrees you have. Not saying that how many degrees you have is wrong, but those are not going to be in a place that makes a man more attracted to you. But notice it says chaste conduct, right? In accompanied with fear, which is respect, can change the man, can change the environment. Let's move a little bit forward in verse 5. For in this manner, in former things, the holy women, who? Holy women, who trusted in God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their husbands. So the submissiveness of the women of old was their adornment, was their thing that made them feel proud. That when a woman is in an environment, men, when she feels that she's protected and taken care of, that's her golden, that's her jewelry, that's her covering. That's what makes she feels good. And my thing is that in order for a woman to be able to do that, right, she has to make sure that she finds a place where she can be loved. And men, you have to now denote that love. But in verse 6, it says, as Sarah obeyed husband, calling him Lord, respect, whose daughters you are if you do good and are not afraid with any terror. But then verse 7 has to emphasize for the men, husband, likewise, dwell with them with understanding. Give honor, respect to your wives as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. So yes, a woman's adornment is her submissiveness. But notice that adornment is come in a place where she can say, oh, I submit to my husband because he protects me. He does not abuse me. He provides for me. I don't have to worry. And he's the priest of my home, right? And these three things should be the thing that she when she goes out into the world, is not about how good she looks. It's about, hey, I have these three things when I go home to whoever I'm with. To the man that's in my life, he's the priest, he protects, and he provides. And for husbands, we have to lay the foundation. I'm not married. But men, we have to lay the foundation for this to happen. Notice, at the end of the day, it's okay for you as a man to be strong, to be assertive. That this world, what it says, toxic masculinity, only comes in the context of when, as a man, you become abusive and you use your power to take something from the woman. But for you as a man, you must be strong. You must be assertive. You must stand up for right, and you must be loving. That's where true power comes. And for a woman, I have to emphasize this point, that being masculine is not attractive. Submissiveness is. Respect is. And what happens in today's society, a lot of women who are INDEPENTENT, I don't need a man, end up single and alone into their 30s and 40s. And that is the clear reality. Because we are become adversarial and not complementary. Men create love, women denote respect. And men have to go first in putting that respect forward and putting that love forward, and the respect will come. Because love denotes and begets love. However, what the world is going to say is that there can be too masculine in a relationship. There cannot for a successful relationship. That the woman cannot be a man. This is not talking about career. This is about about masculinity. And as men, it's okay to be masculine. And as women, it's powerful, as we've just seen, to be feminine. Feminine does not mean you're less than. right? Because notice what happens. He created man and woman in his image. He created masculinity and femininity in his own image. And so to make one greater than the other means to disgrace his image. But what is even more powerful here is that one covers the other. One protects the other. The women are the weaker vessel, but what happens now is that men, they're trying to make you mentally weak and physically strong. And what happens is that only when you're physically strong, what you're going to do, you're going to end up using. You're going to end up using that strength, not to perfect, but to abuse. But when you understand that as a man, your mental strength, yes, in career, has to come with you in your word, studying, becoming spiritually strong, then everything that comes out, your physical strength would do to uphold and to protect the environment and not to tear it down. But now let's move to a case study and into the word. What does submissiveness mean? So what does submissiveness mean in the context of Hebrew? So in Hebrew, the word hypotassō means submissiveness. And it means to submit to one's control, to yield to one's admonition or advice. And so when the man is able to create an environment that is full of love, full of respect, and the woman is in a place where she's willing to submit to that love, she would admire his advice, he would admire his admonition, right? This is not talking about a dominance in the place of physically, but it's in terms of respect to leadership, to direction. And a man who's first seeking after the Father and then seeking to then lead the woman, but is leading her in accordance with love and with sound wisdom and advice, a woman will be able to submit unto that. But then let's move to a case study where we're able to see that. So everybody talks about Ruth and, I want my Ruth, or someone wants their Boaz. But in Ruth chapter 2, we see something very amazing that takes place. Is that in the second verse, Ruth says to Naomi, her mother-in-law, that let me go into the field so that I can, find myself pleasing to the one who owns it, which is, Boaz. So she's literally saying, I'm going to position myself to be seen by Boaz. But notice, Boaz had an environment for her to be able to come into. Second, when we go a little bit further into the chapter, and if you read it, you'll see that Boaz then goes and approaches, asks, okay, who is that woman who's working? He says, that is Ruth. And he goes and he says, Ruth, I've heard about the way you've been dedicated and determined. He says, well, I'm going to tell the men not to harm you, to, one, protect you. I'm going to also tell them that you can, get the water when you're thirsty, and then you can eat and glean after the young women who also are around. And so several things happen in the story of Ruth, specifically in chapter 2. One, he is in a place in which he can protect by saying that the other men should not mess with her. Two, he's able to provide because she's created the environment for her to glean from. And then lastly, he was the priest because he was a God-fearing man in order to discern who this woman was. So it's important that men, we create the environments that are loving. We create an environment that we can protect, provide, and be the priest of any environment, and a woman is willing to come in and submit in those times. As men, it is important that we know that it's okay to be strong. That what the world is calling toxic is when a man becomes abusive. And at that point, when we are Christians and we're loving, it's okay to be assertive. Because notice that this environment of security that you will be creating will be tested. It will have to be something that has true integrity, that is strong, that you can really be a rock that she can stand on. And if a man that is strong and dynamic is willing to love, a woman be willing to submit. Think about this. If you look at the U.S. government, the most powerful nation on the earth at this moment, it's easy when the government is not being tyrannical for people to submit. Why? Because it creates an environment that is comfortable enough for people to live into. And that people are willing to relinquish some of their rights for the protection that the government will bestow. So when there's something wrong, we know that America will fight on our behalf in terms of going to war, dealing with other countries, and dealing with certain things. Why? And we're willing to allow them to do that because we know that they have the capacity to do so. However, when the government becomes tyrannical, we as the people will then seek to overthrow the government. Why? Because this is just based on any person who's oppressed will seek to overthrow, right? We see that from just how this country was formed, dealing with some of the issues that were throughout America's history. However, if the country who's supposed to be protecting is fair, just, and does the things it needs to be doing, the citizens will feel comfortable in order to let the government govern over them. Why? Because they know that the government was within their best interest. So the same is that when a man creates an environment that is loving, that is peaceful, that has protection, a woman will be able to come into that space and feel as if she does not need to overthrow the government because she feels safe in the space that's where she is. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in for this video. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comment. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. Stay encouraged, and remember that you're a son and daughter of the Most High. See you later.